too. Tune in every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. to hear us do just that. Only on our station, Radio Free Radio, RadioFradio.com.
Hey y'all, this is Ron Dale Martin Jr. and I gotta tell you, man, this Radio Free Radio thing is quite awesome. And since I spent all my money on steering wheel covers and Marlboros, I need you guys to donate $1 over at Patreon. That site is patreon.com/Radio Free Radio. If you ain't heard about it, you need to get on over there and give your $1. On RadioFradio.com.
Take 16.
It's the chocolate milk and waffle show. Yeah.
Oh yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Let's get it on. Who are these guys? It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
Welcome in, here on Radio for Radio, go tell a friend. Went to Raleigh, Georgia, bring them in. We got so many things to talk about, so let's begin. Putting a highlight on local life on Thursdays, 8 at night. Hope you feeling alright, cause tonight we gon' get you right, yeah, show you right. We gon' laugh, joke, talk, rinse, repeat. We gon' keep it real chill, plus get deep. Ain't no topic off limits, no knock off a gimmick. 10 times out of 9, you'll be fine when we finish. We get talented, hard to get artists to target that audience. Talk accomplishments of those who get no acknowledgement. The studio be hot in the summertime, studio be cold in the winter. And though the chair a bit dusty, it be a throne we enter. Have a seat with us, chocolate milk and waffles, come and eat with us. 2 whole hours, turn your speakers up. And before we get it started, just repeat it thus. It's old chocolate milk and waffle show. It's the chocolate milk and waffle show. We got George, we got Terrell, we got milk, that's chocolate. We got beautiful buttery waffles, just the way your mama used to make them.
Crazy.
Hello, Internet.
What's poppin', people?
We are back with another thrilling episode of the Chocolate Milk and Waffles Show
Killer Croc say raw.
on Radio F Radio.
What's up with
A
the
croc
cat?
can indeed say raw.
What is up with the cat with the hat? It's
the
not
cat
the
in the
cat
hat.
in the hat. It's the cat with the
It's
hat.
a cat in a hat, not
Yeah.
necessarily the cat in the hat.
Just a cat.
Just a cat
What's up, homie?
with a random hat. I'm good, man. How you doing?
I am good, man. I am good.
Yeah,
I actually spoke with one of my grandmothers before I came in.
that's nice.
It's something about speaking with your elders sometimes, man. They just make you look at reality just like, wow, I won't think about that. And it just kind of
Yeah.
levels you out a bit. And it's like, okay, I needed that, you know. And it's like they know.
Mhm.
Like, baby, you need to hear this right now. You're like, I don't want to. I'm trying to get on the air and have fun. No, baby, you need to listen. Need to let it go, baby. Okay.
Is that who just called you right before the show?
Nah.
Oh. Because you just Mr. Popular. You were getting phone calls right up
Yeah.
until showtime. We apologize to our listeners out there and to our guests for the technical difficulties we experienced just a little bit earlier, right before we went on air, for anybody who had to deal with us going off for a little bit. But we are back. Let's see. What do we have coming up locally? You got anything going on
man.
over? You got Arts Out Loud coming up.
Yeah, this will be the one and only time where Feature Fridays and Arts Out Loud is going to be on the same Friday.
Right.
Only time, because out of respect, we're going to switch Arts Out Loud to the third Friday starting next month. But next week we will have our first Arts Out Loud of 2017. It's going to be going with like a Voltron theme. I don't even know why I did that.
I saw the flyer. I was like, I know that font.
Sometimes I just get downright silly with it. But going to have James Bush, Siobhan will be which was a guest here before. Was it Wissenat? Wissenat.
I just call her Siobhan the dope one.
Yeah, Siobhan the dope one. Matt, yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. Siobhan the dope one. She's going to be our featured gallery artist for the month of January leading into February. We're also going to have Chris Fallon.
Nice.
Another local favorite and someone who's been a past guest. And still kind of think we're up in the air about Hurricane because I don't know where she's
No, ironically enough, I had invited her to Feature Fridays too.
So
and when she, the last I had heard from her, she she needed to get back to me about whether or not she could because of work.
Yeah.
So she actually hit me up, and I was like, no, we'll take you in February. Go ahead and do Arts Out Loud this month.
Wow.
Um, So, yeah.
Okay.
You got a dope little lineup over
Yeah,
there.
I'm loving it. I'm
Nice.
just going.
Nice.
That's the thing about hosting, man. When you just get and getting to pick who comes. Sometimes you just get to sit back and chill. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna enjoy this, and I'm also excited. Next month was going to be our first. I want to because we're going to do it so close to the kickoff of Carnival season.
Okay.
We're actually going to do our first Caribbean winter, where it's going to be all pretty much artists that that are of Caribbean descent.
Oh, that's dope.
So
That's
yeah.
dope.
So we're gonna try to.
So you're going with themes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Gonna try to stick with. I've tried to do themes before, but sometimes I get off of it because
It can get really challenging to come up with a
Yeah.
new theme month after month after month.
Yeah. So we're gonna roll with it, and in January, February, March, we're gonna bring back the elements of hip hop again. So we're gonna.
Sweet.
So you know how that goes.
That was a good show. I'll be at that for
Yeah.
sure. Especially since it's not going to conflict with Future
I'm
Fridays.
gonna have to
now.
bring some favorites back. Next month also we're going to the 28th. It's going to be the book release for. They're going to do
the 757 Perspectives.
That's right.
Is that when it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be 28th.
When are they doing that? Where are they doing that?
They're going to be doing it at Cozy's.
Like Cozy's. I don't know.
It's a comedy club.
Cozy's.
Cozy's, whatever, man. I don't know.
They're doing a book release at a comedy club?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be open
That's
mic,
interesting.
so yeah.
That's
So,
interesting.
open mic. But anyway, that's pretty much it for me. Anything you need to know is go to bodyfusion.com. See what Redhead Olivia Pope and I are talking about over there.
Nice.
And like I said, that's it for right now.
Over at the venue, we got our monthly events, the slams, the writing workshops, the weekly open mic. The comedy show is coming up on the third Saturday of this month. On the last Friday of the month, we have our Feature Friday event. We have 6 amazing features lined up for that. Aaron Ann, a.k.a. LoJack of Parks and Rec. We have Rob Holmes, Bent Spoke, Isaac Fields, the comedian, Lamont Ferguson, and The Concept, bringing up the musical entertainment for the evening. 6 incredible acts, and after each performance, you guys take over the show, and you guys get to interview each performer. Then on the 31st, last Tuesdays, it's making its comeback.
Yeah.
So definitely look them up and find out all the information on that. I'll actually look it up at some point during the show, and we'll have that for you at the top of the hour when we come back from our break at the end of the show. All right. So I think that about covers all the local stuff.
Yeah,
going
look,
on.
I want to say something real quick.
Sure.
George and I just literally signed our first autograph
Yeah.
as Chocolate Milk and Waffles.
I haven't quite finished. We went live, so I had to stop writing. Otherwise,
What's funny is, like, last week, if anybody was listening, Big Merce was on here, a.k.a. Ego Mini. This kid is my son, my youngest son, and he was, like, instantly became a celebrity at school, like, overnight. And he hits me up. Was like, yo, one of my friends wants your autograph. I was like, what? So it's just very interesting to know that it's like high school kid wants our autograph. It just reminds me of, like, there was an entire kick chat going on while we were doing the show from kids in Lakeland High School. And that just made me feel real good to know that the next generation wanted to hear what we had to say concerning various topics. And that's part of why we're doing some of the things that we do here, not just with the Chocolate Milk and Waffle Show, but on Radio Free Radio.
so for all of you listening, I want everyone to know I left him some advice on this autograph, and I want everybody else to follow the same advice. I think it's important. Fight crime, eat your veggies, wash behind your ears. That's directly from Chocolate Milk. Take that to the bank. That's all good stuff. And thanks for listening.
Yeah.
So, we're doing something a little bit different this week on Chocolate Milk and Waffles. Our guest is not in studio. Our guest is calling all the way from 3 time zones away on the other side of the continent from California. Joseph DePaul, are you there? Hello. Hey, how are you, brother?
I'm doing really well, my man. How are you?
Good to talk to you, man. It's been a while.
You have a nice
It
phone
has been a
voice.
long time, so I do want to say congratulations on the show. I
Thank
listen
you.
when I can, and I do enjoy it.
Yeah,
Very,
we're
very
coming
much.
up on a year here in March.
Yeah.
We
That's
still
awesome.
haven't made plans for our
I was
anniversary show.
I was
but
talking to Marquita about that. I was like, just plan on being here. I don't know what Thursday we're gonna do.
yeah, it's gonna be something. It's gonna
Yeah.
be interesting. We might have like a Jerry Lewis style telethon.
Yeah.
Sure.
Raise money for maybe a HRYP or something. That might be cool. Anyway, so what have you been up to since you so for our listeners at home that aren't familiar with Joseph DePaul, first a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a magician and also a podcaster. I'm on the podcast called Therefore I Geek, and it's a pop culture podcast where we talk about all things geeky, movies, television, comic books, and books.
Nice.
stuff.
And also, I have a weekly magic show. Not this week is one of the reasons why I can do the show tonight. Almost every Thursday at the Comedy Palace in San Diego, California, called Thursday Night Magic.
Oh,
And
sweet.
we are going to be doing
Good for you.
the San Diego Comedy Festival on the 26th. So anyone listening in California, please drop by.
So where can I'm gonna probably ask you this a couple times over the course of the show, but where can people tune in and find your podcast?
The podcast is on almost every platform you can find. The guy who runs it is a good friend of mine named Andrew, and we are on Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes. We're on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, and we post news articles and funny pictures. And we encourage all the fans to interact with us and give us suggestions about what they want to hear, see, or especially tell us if they think anything that I or the co-host have said are wrong.
Okay, that sounds like my type of podcast.
Yeah, I want to listen just to complain.
Yeah, so, like we are all about that. It's like we had when I first started the podcast a little less than a year ago, I had this joke. One of our co-hosts, Tracy, I would say like hashtag Tracy's wrong, just to get under her skin.
Wow. That sounds like something I would do for real.
How long you been doing the podcast?
I think it's a little less than a year.
Okay.
A little less than a year, and I enjoy it very much. I was like a guest a few times when Andrew started it a couple years ago, and then he kind of brought me on full time, kind of be like just the professional goof to their kind of like NPR style discussions.
How was that different than the stuff you had been doing up until that point? Was that the first time you'd done anything like a podcast?
A podcast, yeah. I had a buddy of mine. So out here in California, my partner in the magic show, a very talented young magician named Baruch Guerrero, is also a really talented voice actor. And he did a college radio show. And I did a couple episodes of college radio with him. And I absolutely love broadcasting and talking. It's one of those things, if I had a chance to have a second career or do it all over again, I would try and do broadcasting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just think it's so cool.
Terrell and I have been, at least I'm not going to speak for him, but this was totally new to me.
Oh, it's new to me too.
I had been invited to a couple podcasts before, but to actually have my own, our own radio show that we do once a week, it was kind of an eye-opening experience too, because it was, again, like nothing I had ever really done before. Was there anything that surprised you going into this that you wouldn't have thought of before, or challenges that you face when entering
it's funny when it comes to like broadcasting, either doing radio or podcasts? For me, it's one of those things where I sit there and go, when can I start? Let's just do this. It's just the lights go on. It's similar to a performance.
It is. It
right?
really is.
Very much so.
And we're all performers here in one respect or another. So when you turn it on, it to me it was just very natural.
Yeah, I think that was part, at least on my part, like when we first started doing it, we started preparing interviews and writing questions. And first of all, neither of us have the time had the time to do
and
that
plus
week
we
after
sucked
week.
at it. It just like felt like we weren't really being ourselves.
Yeah, it was very difficult to make it sound natural. So we at some point we just like, you know what? Forget it.
I think we just got lazy. Like
and we got lazy, and eventually it was like, you know what? We're not gonna prepare anymore. We're just gonna show up once a week.
Show up like, hey,
and
you're here, I'm here. Let's roll with it.
But it's been a really, really fun and cool experience. Like I don't know that you and I would even be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for the podcast. As sad as that is to say, it's honest. But so
Yeah, because you suck as a friend.
You've
You
been
don't
gone
call.
how long now?
You don't
Like
call.
2
You don't
years?
write.
You don't call
It's
no
gonna be
postcards.
2 years this February.
You don't send chocolates.
2 years this February. Wow,
2
man.
years this February, yeah.
Wow, time flies.
Mm.
So, a lot of what we talk about here on Chocolate Milk and Waffles is the arts and the scene. How do the scenes compare from here to Cali, especially in a place like San Diego, where I imagine there's a lot of art?
It's so big compared to Hampton Roads. So in the Hampton Roads area, it was everyone knew almost everybody,
Right.
and here it's like I know a slither of people that I see once or twice. It's like, oh yeah, I know him, but other than that, it's very different. Especially with the proximity to Los Angeles, there's a lot of like changeover. Guys down here will be like, oh, I'm moving up to LA. And then guys from LA will do shows down here, and you're like, geez, these guys are really good. LA is kind of scary. So it's really kind of just a bigger pond. That's really
Right.
what it is.
So how was it adjusting to that after performing in Hampton Roads for so long?
It took a little bit because the scene is a little different. With Hampton Roads, I'll say a lot of the like open mics or feature spots or showcase shows, you had time to work with. Work on. You had time to do an act. You had 5-10 minutes to do an act. Here, it's like you got 2 minutes to impress, and it's
Yeesh.
very, very
Wow.
difficult.
And I imagine
like
it's very
you better
cutthroat too.
impress.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was
they're-
about to say.
Yeah.
Did you get to witness anything outside of your particular realm of comedy and magic?
Well, they have a really nice poetry scene, and a guy that I know you admire, Rudy Francisco, is down
yeah,
here.
yeah. I think he's based out of San Diego, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
I live in a district called North Park, and pretty much walking distance from me is a place called Queen Bee's Cultural Arts Center.
I've heard
That
of
is almost like a mirror to the venue, right? It's the West Coast version. It's just the building's slightly bigger, and it has a similar culture built around
Nice.
it, and has a similar style open mic and slam poetry. And I think that's his base of operations, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't
Oh, no
been there in a
kidding.
little while, but he hosts a slam there like once a month.
Yeah, he recently competed somewhere, and Hurricane, one of our local poets, she made it to one of the same rounds in the slam as him. Ended up beating him that round.
Dang.
Yeah, her and I had a conversation about that this morning, like, because, like, we look at these, what we consider celebrity poets, and in this poetry world, we really are just people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're just people. And I know somebody who beat Rudy Francisco in a round, personally. I have her phone
Yeah.
number in my phone. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. It's
got
funny
her
how,
instant
like, the
messenger.
arts are the arts pretty much no matter where you go.
Yeah,
It's just how competitive the pond may be.
Yeah.
that's certainly what I've gathered from it.
Yeah. George said something I don't think you quite heard him, but it was something I agree with him. Like, is it like cutthroat out there? Like, if you said you got 2 minutes to impress, do you feel like you have that cutthroat type atmosphere sometimes?
A little bit, yes. And then me personally, I tried to find atmospheres where that's not necessarily the case.
Okay.
But there's definitely stuff like that. There are certain clubs where you got to impress at the open mic if you get on, because it's sometime a draw, or you don't get there to sign up in time, and then you've got 2 or 3 minutes to impress, and then they'll pass you through to the kind of next round, next group of performers. You get a little more time. I haven't gotten that far. I got really fortunate is that I was performing with another group of people who put on their own shows at this club, the Comedy Palace. The owner saw me and says, "Hey, I really want to do a magic show here. Can you put one on?" And I went, "Yes." And I was one of those things where, like, I'm just gonna keep doing it. And he enjoys the show. He enjoys the act. I invite other comedians and magicians to be a part of the show, to expand the show. And we have a couple guys that cycle through here. So I'll be honest, I got really fortunate that someone just saw the act, liked it, and said, "Do you want a weekly show or a monthly show?" And I said, "Sure." And it was one of those things in the first year we were like, is this really happening? And after we've done it about a year now, it'll be a year at the end of this January, and we're like, we should really take this a lot more seriously than we've been doing.
That's really impressive to make it that long in an area where it's so saturated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you, man. I'm proud of you. That's awesome.
Thank you, man.
I can't believe it's been 2 years.
Yeah, neither can I.
Any plans to come back to the East Coast?
Maybe long term. But right now, I lived in Virginia for 4 years. I enjoyed it, and I plan on spending about 4 or 5 years out here also.
Yeah. Yeah, you always did say that. You liked kind of taking it
Moving
different
around,
places.
yeah.
Well, that's what's up. So, outside of magic and the comedy, what have you been getting yourself into out there?
Well, do we want to talk about the main topic? Is that
Yeah,
what the segue? Yeah.
I think we
So
can
this
get
is
into
funny.
that.
It relates to the podcast that I'm a part of. Therefore, I geek. So last year, 2016, in June, I was at the Phoenix Comic-Con, and I was attending a couple of the panels. And one of the panels was titled "George Orwell, the Father of Modern Dystopia." I was a fan of Orwell. I've read a number of his books and a couple biographies on him, and documentaries. So I knew a little bit about the guy, and I had some fairly pressing questions that I wanted to ask the panelists. And I was assuming we were going to get panelists that we weren't that far from ASU. So I'm expecting like history professors and professors of literature to give this talk.
Okay.
And what we got were a couple sophomores from ASU that presented what appeared to be a 15-minute high school book report.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, it was. They gave it the good old college try, but it wasn't to
what
the
you really
level that
wanted.
I would expect a public presentation on one of literature's titans to be.
Fair enough.
And
Okay.
it was one of those things where I could have given this presentation and just winged it.
Wow.
And the presentation was like 15 minutes, 8 minutes of which was audio. And I personally felt they kind of missed the mark. They stated their case, but I thought they missed the mark. And they opened the panel to the audience for discussions. And it's one of those aspects of my personality where I just kind of took over the whole proceedings. Like I stood up, I asked, I have something to say, and they're like, come up to the mic. And I got on the dais with them.
Oh, wow.
And took one of the mics and just stated my case for the, and it became this back and forth conversation.
very
Why did you
Joseph.
hurt their, why
That's
did you hurt
very
their
Joseph
feelings
DePaul.
like that?
Yeah,
I can totally see you
my-
doing that.
Right, and my friends were not at this panel. I went there with a mutual friend, but not any of the podcasters were there. And to this day, they regret not being a part of this or recording it or taking pictures. But after that, I said, hey, listen, I love comic book conventions. I love panels. I'm a fan of Orwell. And it was one of those moments is if these guys can really do it, I think we can too. So since then, I've spent about 6 months just, almost every day trying to read something about Orwell, some of his works, rereading his books, taking copious notes. And the plan is this Phoenix Comic-Con 2017 is to present a panel on the book 1984 and Orwell. And my main thesis is that if you take the book 1984, which is probably one of his two most popular works,
Right.
it's a lens into not just our history, but the man's biography and his other works. And that's kind of my main point. And we can get into all the kind of details as we go along.
Well, we are at Chocolate Milk and Waffles relying heavily on Joseph DePaul to carry this particular episode. I did watch that video that you sent me on his life.
I saw no such video.
And I have the outline that you sent me of your research. The outline, everyone at home, alone is 2 pages long. So,
well, that was what got me. As I knew enough about Orwell, like I said, I could have winged a presentation and done what I thought was a better job than the presenters at this convention. That being said, to really understand the man and his work overwhelmed me a little bit, because not only do you have to know him, his biography, and his work, but because his work was so connected to the early 20th century, politics and history of the early 20th century, I realized I needed a good grasp of the ancillary topics that he talked about. So that's why that was so encompassing, because for those who are familiar with 1984 and Animal Farm, they are allegories for the modern world in some ways,
right.
Particularly Russia, Germany, and I think less talked about but equally important, the Spanish Civil War.
Okay, so I guess they say the best way to eat an elephant is a little bit at a time.
What the?
So let's.
I've never heard that before.
You never heard that expression?
No.
Yeah.
I've never known people to desire to eat an elephant either.
I mean, if you're hungry enough,
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
guess so.
or if you're incredibly competitive.
I bet elephant is chewy too.
I got the feeling it would be.
Interesting,
leathery.
interesting point. And just to
It's
really
gamey.
kind of harangue this, Orwell has one of Orwell's best essays. And what's interesting is we think of him as a novelist, but at the time he was most well known as an essayist. And one of his most impressive and interesting essays is called "Shooting an Elephant,"
Oh, no kidding.
where he talks about he spent time as an imperial police officer in British India, and the portion of British India was actually modern day Myanmar or Burma. And he tells a story of having to shoot an elephant because it had gotten away from its mahout and it was running rampant in the villages, and how he just did not want to do it. And it's just the excruciating pain that he goes through shooting this elephant, and then the elephant just not dying.
Oh no.
You're not dying. And also, it's a deeply anti-colonial work. We think of Orwell as just an anti-communist writer, because 1984, An Animal Farm, and 1904 was helped published by the John Birch Society. But you dig deeper into his works, he was deeply anti-colonialism, deeply anti-fascism, deeply anti-communism, specifically Stalinism. And Shooting Elephant is one of the great anti-colonial works of his, because he talks about not only is colonialism evil to the people that it's oppressing, particularly in this case the Burmese, but it corrupts the souls of those doing the oppressing. It makes them evil, because here he is, a white guy in a foreign land, having to shoot this elephant, and he just doesn't want to do it. But he's got all these villagers watching him, and if he doesn't do it, he will lose his power as an imperial police officer. And he talks about the corruption that has on people.
Okay.
So white people are expected to shoot stuff, is what you're saying.
At least there, at that moment, because he was the cop with the gun, and they were waiting for him to shoot that elephant so they can eat it.
Oh, so that's where it ties into the eating the elephant.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of eating the elephant, what was the first bite you took? When you said to yourself, okay, this is a figure that I really want to go further into.
Yeah, it started with 1984,
Okay.
and just that is his last book. I mean, he dies several months after the book is published in 49. Today's the 19th. The anniversary of his death is in 2 days.
Oh wow.
He died January 21st, 1950. I mean, at the beginning of the second half of the 20th century, we lose him. He was only 46. Keep that in mind. He was only 46. And 1984, I found to be just this incredibly powerful and terribly dark vision of the future, and also a profoundly well-written anti-totalitarian screed. It combines elements of history and science fiction to tell this anti-totalitarian, anti-communist story that, if he were doing a polemic, he was just writing an anti-Stalin essay like he had done many times, he probably wouldn't have gotten this traction, right? And he was also lucky, because he wrote the right book at the right time, in all fairness. But it was, it was a good book. It was the book for its time. And when I read it, I was taken by it. And this was someone that was like, oh, this is someone we should be aware of. And also, Orwell is a guy, an author, I think we all know. We know the name George Orwell. The word Orwellian has infected our language, unlike many authors. I mean, there's only a few.
It's become
authors
synonymous
that I
with
can think of.
dystopia.
Yeah, he's synonymous with it, but it's almost, when
You're
you
using
think of a
words I
world
don't
that's
know.
awful, you go, oh, 1984. Don't be like 1984. Don't be like Orwell's vision. I mean, that's just
You really don't know what
infected our
dystopian
language.
means?
No, don't know what it means.
So it's
okay,
a play on the word utopia. I believe that was coined by H.G. Wells, and
What's
it
a
was
utopia?
a no place. Like
Are
a
you playing
perfect-
dumb, or you really don't know what these words are?
I'm just playing dumb, dude.
Oh, because
Oh, okay. I always sometimes I take people too serious. It's like, I can help you out. I'm here to
I'm
help.
looking at him and I don't know if he's being serious or not.
Yeah. So more to the point, when you hear the word Orwellian, it means this kind of dystopic future or an abusive language, and very few authors have that impact on our language. I've really kind of racked my brain to try and think of other authors who have affected our language the way Orwell has. The only other guy I can think of at the top of my head is Nabokov with the phrase Lolita. Like, we know what Lolita means right away because of that book.
Right. Well, I got Jabberwocky from Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
and Lewis
exactly.
Carroll. So
Jabberwock is a dance group.
Jabberwockies are a dance group. Oh man, I feel like I'm gonna be fielding you all day, all night long. So at what point in your where are you at in your research now? I'm having a hard time. I know zero about Orwell. Like you said, most
Okay.
people only know Animal Farm in 1984.
Right. So let's just go right from the beginning. The
Okay.
man was the man we know as George Orwell was born in 1903.
I know that wasn't his birth name.
Is not his birth name. He was born Eric Arthur Blair.
I had
Okay.
to change
And-
my name too.
And
Eric
he
Arthur.
was actually born in India. His father worked for the opium department in Britain, and this was a very dirty trade. The opium department in British India was the department that basically pushed drugs into China. Right, this was the opium wars to basically get the Chinese population addicted to drugs. And this has a profound effect on him early on because Orwell, throughout most of his work and writings in his life, has a profound sense of guilt. One, from kind of his father's dirty trade, and two, a sense of guilt from being from what he called the upper lower middle class or something like that.
White privilege.
He was very much an elite and hated elitism and very much an intellectual and hated other intellectuals.
He absolutely does, and we'll get to it. But one of the books that most explains that is his book Road to Wigan Pier. But you're absolutely right. He had a great deal of just guilt about it, and so he would rail against this throughout all of his written work. He loved his mother. He had two sisters. He was, like I said, born in India, but in the early adolescence, he moved to Britain, lived with his mom and sisters. His dad stayed in India for much of his life up until retirement.
That was one of the things that stood out the most to me when I was watching the documentaries and reading up on some of his stuff, that just like all artists, his personal life and his upbringing directly reflected in what he wrote.
Yeah, and almost it's like you can read his work, and if you know his biography, you can point out the people in his life.
Right.
Or, oh wait, he did that. Right. He knew that directly.
Right.
And so what he does is he goes to a school called St. Cyprian's around 1912 through 1917. That has a deep impact on him because it's this kind of really tough British boarding school. And these are kind of the seeds that get planted throughout his life, is that he can't stand being there. He hates it. He writes this essay called Such Were the Joys, a fairly long essay about his time there. And it's horrific. It just talks about the guilt the headmasters put on him, the beatings that he received. He had a problem with bedwetting, and he couldn't control it, but he was still getting beat up anyway. That essay was never published until after his death because it was considered too scandalous.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Especially back then, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, a lot of people thought he was exaggerating, and it turned out when you ask people who he went to school there with, they were like, no, it was just as bad as he said. The next stage of his life, he goes to Eton College, and one of his professors is actually Aldous Huxley, the man who wrote Brave New World,
Okay.
which had a big influence on him, and he was much more suited to Eton. He kind of went off and did his own thing, so he ticked off his professors, but they weren't beating him. Very intelligent, did very well. What's interesting about the end of the Eton years, and he's there from like 1914 to 1919 or something like that, is most of them will go to like Oxford or Cambridge, one of these highbrow colleges. But again, Orwell was not one of these dudes, and for whatever reason, he goes into the Burmese Imperial Police from 1922 to 1927. And this is just one of the shocking moments. Like, why he did this is still a mystery to us. Like, we're not sure why he did. He had the grades to go into Oxford.
If you had to take your best guess from the research that you've done thus far on him, what? Obviously, it's all speculation, but what does Joseph DePaul think might have been his reasoning?
In one part, I think he may have just wanted adventure.
Okay.
On the other hand, he also his family. He might have been following the family business. His father, like I said, was part of the imperial service in India. His grandparents had a teakwood business in the Burmese region, so he may have just wanted to get out of England and see the world. And his time in the imperial police had a profound effect on him. He writes many essays about it, of course, Shooting an Elephant, the very dark essay, A Hanging, and his novel Burmese Days, he writes in 37, I think, comes out of it. And he's there for about 5 years. And just as much of a mystery is we don't know why he left. One of his admirers, Christopher Hitchens, thinks that Orwell knew that if he stayed as a cop in Burma, it would have turned him into a sadist, like he talked about in Shooting an Elephant, how it was turning him into someone who had to be brutal to an oppressed people that he didn't want to be. And that had a huge change on his life, because he leaves Burma, goes back to Europe, and becomes a bum on purpose for 6 years.
Wow.
And this is where he begins his writing career. He's a tramp for 6 years between London and Paris. He's picking hops, and he's doing this kind of research to write a book that will eventually become the book Down and Out in London and Paris. You know, the first person account of being a bum, poor, working class person in modern Europe. And that's when he adopts the name George Orwell. He ceases to become Eric Blair, and the name George Orwell comes from either King George or the patron saint of England, St. George, take your pick, and the Orwell River, which wasn't far from his family house.
That I learned, that he chose the last name from a river.
Yes. So the early parts of his work are very focused on the working class. Like that's in Down and Out in London and Paris, Road to Wigan Pier, Coming Up for Air, the novel. These are all focused on the working class. And he wasn't a fairly successful writer. He's writing a lot of essays, but he's not making a lot of money. And he shuns the kind of support from his family because he really wants to be part of the working class. He really wants to tell that story. And his first semi-hit is a very, very good book called Road to Wigan Pier. And that's his first-person account of miners and working-class factory workers of Northern England. And if you want to know, it's almost like, it's amazing because he goes through how much they make a week, how much they spend a week, how much they spend on rent, their living conditions, how many people are living in these homes, how far they have to walk to the bathroom. I mean, he gives you such detail of if you want to know what it's like to live in 1930s Depression era Northern England, The Road to Wigan Pier is a fascinating insight to that world because he does not sugarcoat it. And he lived it. He lived it.
Right.
He went down into the mines with the miners and things like that. It's really a remarkable read.
So what was it about his upbringing, do you think, that made him despise that sort of social classism so much?
You know, when I wonder about it, I think he just had a natural animosity to snobbishness, right, or to airs of superiority. He just it repelled him from the start. I think that was just innate in him, is the feeling of people being superior to others and being in charge of others was always repugnant. And it's a theme throughout most of his work as he looks for this kind of tyranny. And of course, it starts with the working class. And his early works are strongly anti-capitalism. Like, he really felt, and he has this great passage in Road to Wigan Pier of, this is where industrialism has brought us. We've got people living in broken down double buses where the damp is soaking through the floors and into their mattresses. This is, so he was
and
really...
that was a reality. That wasn't just good writing.
Right. No, and he had a way of explaining it. It was interesting. A lot of, there's a book out there called Orwell's Nose, and it's just a book about, by an author who lost his sense of smell, and he was reading Orwell, and as he's reading Orwell, he's fascinated by that every chance Orwell gets, he talks about what things smell like. So so Orwell really tries to give you this picture of what life was like whatever he was writing.
Smells are probably one of the most difficult things to describe in literature. You can describe how something looks,
Mhm.
you can just and kind of paint a picture for someone, but it's much more difficult to convey something like
Yeah.
a smell.
Mm-hmm.
And a smell probably has the most emotional attachment.
Yeah.
You can recall a memory much quicker from a smell than from a photograph, even.
Yes, definitely.
Like to this
Yeah,
day.
if you smell like suntan lotion, like your head is in the beach, like right away.
Yeah,
you go to
exactly.
Your brain.
I'm black, so I don't have that problem.
I thought you were gonna.
No, I was about to thinking about the smell thing. Was there's, I think it's Sum 21 has a song where he's like he wants the smell of a candle that's a scent that remind him of his mother, and it's very true. Certain scents, and when you read books, and if the writer can do a good enough job of writing what a scent is like, you literally can almost smell it at times.
Right.
And it does help. It does help stimulate your mind in visualizing what's being presented to you.
Yeah. George Orwell was definitely that type of writer. He can make you picture and be in that scene. So, all right, more about his actual writing and technique since we've kind of moved on to that subject. Have you done any research on what made him the writer that he is specifically?
Well, yeah, he had his huge influences were guys like Jonathan Swift, Mark Twain. He writes a very nice article about or essay about Mark Twain, Jack London, Huxley, obviously. So he uses them as kind of his model. He even has kind of this love-hate relationship with Rudyard Kipling, who wrote the Jungle Book, but is also famous for the white man's burden phrase, which Orwell excoriates him for. But it always seems to be a soft spot for Kipling in Orwell's writing. Even if you read 1984, the very end of that book, when Winston Smith, the main character, is being held in the cell, and he sees one of his co-workers from the Ministry of Records, and the guy's going, they put me in here because I left the word God in a Kipling poem. There's nothing else that rhymes with God that would make the poem work, so he had that kind of, he kept that. He mentions Kipling, I think, twice in 1984, so there is that kind of affinity for him. So I think that was kind of where his style came from. What's interesting, especially with 1984, we talk about how his technique really put you in a world. This is especially true in 1984 because he gets the mood and atmosphere and tone and life of a totalitarian world almost perfectly, right? There's a Polish writer, a guy who wrote The Captive Mind, Milosz something. I can't remember his last name now. I feel embarrassed. I'm blanking on his name. But he lived in totalitarian Poland when it was occupied by the Soviet Union. And he was befuddled. And a lot of people have been befuddled at how Orwell got the mood of a totalitarian state, got life of a totalitarian state, without ever really living in it.
Right.
There's this feeling that he was expelled from the Soviet Union. There's a YouTube clip out there where a reporter says, he was thrown out of the Soviet Union. He never lived in the Soviet Union. He was never in the Soviet Union. So he was able to nail it so perfectly. And I think, and a lot of his biographers say this, and I don't know if it's mentioned a lot when people teach him, especially in high schools, is that it really comes from his experience in Spain. That's a critical part of his biography that I always want to shine extra light on.
Okay, well, that being said, I think this is a good time to take our bottom of the hour break. And when we come back on the other side of 9 o'clock, we'll get into his time in Spain.
Awesome.
All right. You're listening to the Chocolate Milk and Waffle Show on Radio F Radio. We are here with Joseph DePaul. We'll be back on the other side of 9 o'clock.
pen bars are memoirs within pen bars. Men scars, doped off little hope become enlarged. Cringe hard, after judgment the gavel hit. Forced to be on their way without a travel kit. Tell me who could imagine having to fathom this? Living a level above the devil's lavish crib. Many consider the tombstone in a gravel pit. For a taste of freedom, my role, African's advocate. My pen bars are memoirs within pen bars. Men scars, doped off little hope become enlarged. Cringe hard, after judgment the gavel hit. Forced to be on their way without a travel kit. Cold introduction, they ain't even the half of it. When you have addicts having fits, knowing they have to sit without having a fix. Oblivious as they flash a pic of you sideways. Mentally you can't scratch the itch. Life ain't that a bitch. Rolling your blackened tips across the paper for your prints to be documented. Soon after this is silence. Just you and the jaggedness of thoughts you haven't heard in forever. Life has been that intense. My pen bars are memoirs within pen bars. Men scars, doped off little hope become enlarged. Cringe hard, after judgment the gavel hit. Forced to be on their way without a travel kit. Tell me who could imagine having to fathom this? Living a level above the devil's lavish crib. Many consider the tombstone in a gravel pit. For a taste of freedom, my role, African's advocate. My pen bars are memoirs within pen bars. Men scars, doped off little hope become enlarged. Cringe hard, after judgment the gavel hit. Forced to be on their way without a travel kit. As he expressed his concern to his brother, how it seemed like forever has now become a sojourn. Through the Quran and will of Allah, his lessons learned. Graduating from the school of hard knocks, his tassel turned. Release paper diploma, his stomach churns. Just the thought of leaving Oz, the fear. What if return is his will for my life? Picking a cigarette, burning his scrubs, rubs his head full of stress. Attempts to discern what plays his cranium, saying while I'm here, I'm the best Muslim. Never thinking about what rules to bend or abusing them. Everyone who has ever loved me, I'm confusing them. Cause when I'm out, all the right decisions, I'm never choosing them. Instantly, I'm refusing them. Like I can never seem to diffuse the mentality of the streets. I'd rather lose than win. This is bid number 2. I cannot do again what's ruining our people. I pray I never see you again. My pen bars are memoirs within pen bars. Men scars, doped off little hope become enlarged. Cringe hard, after judgment the gavel hit. Forced to be on their way without a travel kit. Tell me who could imagine having to fathom this? Living a level above the devil's lavish crib. Many consider the tombstone in a gravel pit. For a taste of freedom, my role, African's advocate.
Hey guys, Matt and Justin here. Do you like things that are funny? Do you like music? Do you like talk? Well, we've got it all on Good Morning You Drunks.
How do you feel about double middle fingers?
I don't like them, but I will accept them.
Oh, Monday nights, 8 p.m. Good Morning You Drunks, only on our station, Radio Free Radio, RadioFradio.com.
We promise we're not going to give you double middle fingers.
RadioFradio.com.
Take 16.
It's the chocolate milk and waffle show. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's get it on. Who are these guys? It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
Welcome in, here on Radio for Radio, go tell a friend. Went to Maryland, Georgia, bring them in. We got so many things to talk about, so let's begin. Putting the highlight on local life on Thursdays, 8 at night. Hope you feeling alright, cause tonight we gon' get you right, yeah, show you right. We gon' laugh, joke, talk, rinse, repeat. We gon' keep it real chill, plus get deep. Ain't no topic off limits, no knock off a gimmick. 10 times out of 9, you'll be fine when we finish. We get talented, hard to get artists to target that audience. Talk accomplishments of those who get no acknowledgement. The studio be hot in the summertime, studio be cold in the winter. And know the chair a bit dusty, it be a throne we enter. Have a seat with us, chocolate milk and waffles, come and eat with us. 2 whole hours, turn your speakers up. And before we get it started, just repeat it. This is old chocolate milk and waffle show. It's the chocolate milk and waffle show. We got George, we got Terrell, we got milk, that's chocolate. We got beautiful buttery waffles, just the way your mama used to make them.
Crazy show.
And we are back. You are listening to the Chocolate Milk and Waffle Show live from the clubhouse on Radio F Radio. And we are live with our friend Joseph DePaul calling all the way from sunny California.
Beautiful out here. It's just now starting to get dark, or it's just getting dark now. So.
Man,
Yeah, what's your
dark.
point? What's your point?
It's been dark for like 5 hours here.
Yeah.
It's been like 30
Get
days.
you, buddy.
30. What is that movie? 30 Days a Night, the vampire movie in Alaska. Is that what that's called? That's a great movie.
That is
The
a
first
fun-
one is.
I didn't know there was a second one.
There's a second.
Yes.
Is there? Are you at? Okay, it's a little off topic, but I gotta know what happens in the second one. Is it like?
Okay, it's
Excuse me.
pointless, but you remember there was like, what was there, like 2 survivors at the end of the first one, or 1 survivor?
I didn't think anyone's. Oh, the
Yeah.
woman. The woman
Yeah, the
survived.
woman
Right.
survived.
They
Well,
sat together and he disintegrated.
well, somehow, some kind of way, she went back to go save somebody, and she
Cash
pulled-
grab.
Yeah, and he ended up biting her, and it was just stupid.
Cash grab movie.
Yeah,
I don't know there was a second one.
don't feel bad.
But so we are here with Joseph DePaul, and we have been talking about George Orwell for the last hour or so. A man who is known, unfortunately, by many for just 2 of his many works. But we've been talking a lot about him, and where we left off, we were going to talk about his time in Spain, right?
Yeah, this is a very, very important part of his life, and at least from my impression, I don't know if you guys read the books in high school, or did you guys take a class on him, like when you were in high school or anything like that?
He was he was not recommended reading, he was required reading, both Animal Farm, but I mean, I don't know if it was advanced or not, but I was in honors English classes, so I read Animal Farm in middle school. I was probably only like 7th grade, and then 1984 I read in my freshman year of high school, which was A, many years ago, B, many more blunts ago. So if I read it today, it'd be like reading it for the first time. Not so much Animal Farm. I remember Animal Farm a little bit better. There's a really amazing anime done for Animal Farm. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
An anime or an animated film?
Animated film.
From the 50s.
Yeah, really old.
Yeah,
like
really old. And you know what's interesting about
had that
particular
Hobbit
film?
style animation from the animated Lord of the Rings style.
We had that Ralph Bakshi, yes.
Yeah.
1950 style. What's amazing is that movie's only about an hour. It's bankrolled by the CIA.
No kidding.
Okay, the CIA. It's interesting. That's why he gets. Also, I'll mention.
I have a copy of it.
I'm getting an echo, so I don't know if you guys are getting it.
No, I actually hear you pretty clear.
Okay.
He says he's getting an echo.
No, it's gone now, actually.
Oh, okay.
So, never mind.
Was that you, Terrell?
No, but I'm over here laughing at something I just read about Orwell.
What'd you read about Orwell?
About he created a voodoo doll of a bully.
That I haven't heard.
Yes. This says that when he was at what was the school he was called? Eton
College, yeah.
Yes, and he once practiced black magic on a wax effigy of a school bully. After the young man broke his leg, developed leukemia, and died, Orwell reportedly spent the rest of his life believing that he killed him with the voodoo spell.
That is fascinating. I actually have not heard that, but I'm gonna.
You're gonna have to add that to your list of researchable things.
That is hilarious.
That's fantastic. I don't even care. I just think that's great.
Oh my gosh! Look at the picture.
Why do they? Okay, what are you on? What is that? What webpage is
15 things you probably didn't know about Orwell. Shortlist.com.
Shortlist.com. 15 things you probably didn't know about Orwell. There's your starting point.
Oh, that is bad.
All right, so I'll tell you what. You'll be our obscure, weird reference person for the show. We'll check back with you later, Terrell. So, Orwell lands in Spain.
So he lands in Spain. So what's interesting about Spain, for those who don't know, is this is the Great Spanish Civil War that starts in 1936.
Okay.
And the reason why this is important is for two reasons. His experiences in Spain will set him on the trajectory to write Animal Farm in 1984. And I suggest anyone who considers themselves a writer to read the excellent essay, Why I Write. It's a very confessional essay. And in that
I saw
essay,
that noted in your outline.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a fantastic essay. If you get a chance, read it. You can find a little book that has a couple collections of his essays. It's called Why I Write. And in it, he gives away the goose as he basically says, after Spain, after 1936, every piece of serious work I wrote was against totalitarianism and democratic socialism as I saw it. We have to keep in mind he was a socialist, right? He was a man of the left. And the reason why that's important is in Spain, Spain becomes a republic in 1931. There's a coup in 1936 led by, broadly considered the right, which is, it was a group of factions of monarchists and traditionalists and conservatives and to some extent fascists. So they were called the Falange. And eventually their leader became a guy named Franco, Generalissimo Franco. And the international left, who included communists, anarchists, socialists, and just classical liberals, kind of like what Americans would be considered classical liberals, said, no, we are going to go to Spain and defend it. In part because fascist Italy, fascist Germany was supporting Franco, who incidentally, strangely enough, Franco really wasn't a fascist. He didn't really include fascists in his cabinet, but he nevertheless would accept their support. And so those like Orwell said, no, it is our duty to pick up a rifle and go fight fascism in Spain and defend the Republic. The big rallying cry was, they shall not pass, no pasará, right? They shall not pass. And he enlisted
them.
What's that?
It's very Gandalf of them.
Oh, very. Yeah, I always thought about that. It's like, you shall not pass it. How close is that to non pasará? Because, of course, Tolkien used a lot of history to kind of write Lord of the Rings. I was always curious about that. But he joins a militia called the POUM, P-O-U-M, the Party of Marxist Unification. I'm not going to try and do the Spanish version. And he fights in Spain on the Zaragoza front, which is in a region called Catalonia. And if you look at a map of Spain, it's on the border of France, on the far western end of Spain up against the Mediterranean. Barcelona was the capital. And what's interesting about that area is that area had been taken over by the anarchists, and Orwell loved it. He saw it as the worker state, and he was like, this is the ideal government. This is what we defend. And he fights on the front, and what's amazing is in history, there's something called the May Uprisings in 1937 while he's there. And it's the communists taking control of anarchist Barcelona. And then his militia, to make a long story short, becomes outlawed and persecuted, and they're arrested and thrown into jails and put on show trials, all the things we saw in 1984, right? So that's where he sees the totalitarianism of communism happen, is in Barcelona. And he describes it in great detail in a fantastic book called Homage to Catalonia. And the first half is his time on the front, but the second half of the book is his just anger at how the left betrayed itself during the Spanish Civil War. During that time, he takes a bullet in the throat. He survives it. And that's what I think saved him, is he was in hospital, so no one knew where he was, and he was able to escape. But that's where it all starts in Spain, in Barcelona, during those uprisings and the crackdowns on his
He was definitely
militia.
not just all talk. He really walked that life.
Yeah.
He absolutely did, and that was one of the lessons you can take from Orwell. There are many, but one is Orwell. All you have to do is put a little effort in. And Orwell was one of those guys who was like, "Oh, I'm just pick up a rifle and fight fascism. It's that simple. Just go do it."
Yeah.
And that's where we get 1984 and Animal Farm is really that key moment in his life. Is he? And I've said this before, if we understand Animal Farm as this is a story about Russia,
right?
1984 is a story about Russia and Spain. I don't think you can separate those two.
No, I think it's. Well, when I read it in middle school, it was a story. I was at least smart enough to find the metaphor in there of humanity and oppression, but I wasn't, I guess, old enough or hadn't learned about the Russian Revolution yet to make that comparison. And in elementary school, I remember they didn't necessarily teach us that was what it was.
When I read it, I knew it was about. I was even
See,
told that it was about Russia, and but the Spain, I didn't. Couldn't correlate that at all.
There's a really great record called "The Animal and Man" by Dead Prez, the rap group.
Yeah.
Where he actually tells the story of Animal Farm, but in rap form.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's an amazing song. It's an amazing.
Can you send that to me? I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I can totally do that. I'll
that's
do that
wonderful.
when I get it. Shoot me a message and remind me.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what happened? Where did it go from there?
Well, where it goes from there is he leaves Spain. He recovers. He's married at the time. He was married in 1935 to a woman named Eileen O'Shaughnessy, a wonderful, by all accounts, a wonderful woman. He becomes a war correspondent during World War II. And what's amazing is this guy just loved to suffer, right? He really, during World War II, when Britain is being bombed, London is being bombed by the Nazis, he moves to London from the country to be closer to the bombing. Like, that's the kind of guy he was. He enlists in the army. They won't take him. He had TB. He was a long sufferer of TB.
Just real quick to stop you, I just got a text message from my daughter, and she like hits me all caps. She's like, "Oh my gosh, she's talking about the dude for the Animal Farm."
Good. That's wonderful, and
it is wonderful.
I'm glad people learn about this because during World War II, his wife dies. It's amazing. We have the letter. She writes a letter to him before she goes into surgery. She would remove some tumors from her uterus. It turned out to be cancer. She dies minutes after writing that letter, and we have that letter saved. It's a remarkable letter. He adopts a son, and he writes Animal Farm in 45. His wife helps him with that while she's still alive. And what's amazing is because everyone in Britain knew it was about Russia, they tried to suppress it. They were like, you cannot say this about our allies. And Orwell was one of the few that were and this is a lesson I think we can take from him. And he writes this in Why I Write. He goes, no, when I write something, I don't sit down and go, I'm going to write a work of art. I'm going to correct a lie or that I believe has been told. I'm going to make a truth. And Animal Farm was him saying, no, Russia isn't our ally, right? They're convenient right now, but they've done incredibly damaging things. And he knew it because he saw it in Spain. And when he writes 1984, he like exiles himself to this Scottish island. And keep in mind, he's still sick with TB. He's almost on his deathbed when he finishes it. And he dies only months after it's done. And it's this huge hit.
Yeah, I saw an excerpt of an interview that he did on his deathbed. A video interview.
An actor did.
Was that what I saw? Okay. I jumped around a lot. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, it's what's cool about that documentary. It's a BBC documentary, and what they did is they got an actor to play him, but everything he utters is a quote directly from his writing.
Oh wow!
That actor, so that's what that was.
So he literally wrote his own dialogue pre-mortem.
Yeah.
That's almost creepy.
Yeah, he knew he was dying. Like that's the thing. He knew he was on his deathbed, and that's why I think so much of 1984 encompasses so much of his previous life and experiences. Is that it was almost like shorthand for him, right? It was just the way he could knock it out.
So now the obvious question: I guess we'll take them one at a time. Let's start with Animal Farm. How does Animal Farm parallel what's going on today in society?
So this is the great question of after the Soviet Union is gone, right? With communism, the great evils, and Hitchens has this way of Orwell was right about three things of the 20th century: evils of colonialism, evils of fascism, evils of communism. He got those right. So now that for the most part we've beaten those evils, does he even matter? And I think my argument and Hitchens' argument is the same as, yeah, he absolutely does, because Animal Farm shouldn't be taken just as a book about Soviet Russia and Stalinist Russia. But it's something that, we talk about totalitarianisms being cliches, and as Hitchens points out, they're cliches because they all do the same darn thing, right? That they want power, and so they do the same thing. So let's be honest about it. And if you look at today, in relation to Animal Farm. Look at something like ISIS, right? There's a great intellectual named Majid Nawaz. He was a former Islamic radical, served time in an Egyptian jail for being a radical. And he has said this on the record with NPR and in all his interviews, is what started to change his mind is he got a copy of Animal Farm and he started reading it. And he said, oh my God, if these radical extremists get in charge, what's going to happen to the world or wherever they become in charge is going to be what happened at Animal Farm. And I think that's a very profound point, that this is a guy who is a radical extremist, nearly dangerous, trying to spread, his form of Islamism in Egypt, was jailed, was with the same dudes who shot Anwar Sadat, arguing with him, and reads Orwell, and it helps. It plays a part in changing his mind.
That's part of what was so genius about, and I'm sure he did this with the foresight of the impact it would have later on, was making the characters animals, as opposed to blatantly speaking on the Russian Revolution.
Yeah. Right.
It added a timelessness to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
I mean, and this is going to sound like a very odd comparison, but it's not unlike what Disney does with its films in a lot of cases. Like the Robin Hood version, it's the anthropomorphized animals, Zootopia, Lion King, Fox and the Hound. They tell us these profound stories and they make the characters animals. So that these stories can continue on forever. It's not so much a reflection of a direct reflection of society, but then it is.
You
all
take
right.
the lesson from it and put it in.
Right, exactly. And I think as writers, that's something that, and artists in general, but I think as artists, that's something we all strive to do. Like when we were talking about poetry and publishing books, Jeff Hewitt and I he said, why is the stage not enough? Because there will be a point when you can't get on that stage anymore, and these books live on forever. So there was a time when George Orwell knew, I think, that there would be a time where he couldn't pick up that rifle and go fight fascists. So he had to leave something behind that would continue to spark that fight in other people.
I think he was keenly aware of his mortality. I mean, this is a guy who took a bullet in the throat, right?
Yeah,
this is
a
man who was dying of TB, in the last couple of years of his life. I think you're absolutely right. He was very keenly aware of posterity at that point. And I think that's why he changed his style, because he was known as a narrative essayist, a polemicist. And then his last two books are a remarkable departure. Is he tells what seems to be a fairy tale and then a science fiction novel.
Right.
But they have had humongous impact and staying power.
Oh yeah, absolutely. To the point where they've become curriculum, classics even. So, all right, let's jump to 1984. Same question.
I'm sorry, I might have lost you. What was the question?
How it relates to today.
Well, again, it
keeping in mind for and not to question our audience's intelligence, but for clarification, 1984, a book written in 1949 about a dystopian future.
I found that very, because I never knew that's when it was written, that it was written in 1949, and it just threw me off when I would see that. I'm like, oh, that doesn't make sense.
It'd be like if somebody today wrote a book called 2099.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they're always Spider-Man 2099.
Right, but it's almost uncanny how much he got right.
Right, and
almost Nostradamian, if that's a word.
Yeah, I mean, so with 1984, what I try and caution some people with is this idea that Orwell was predicting the future, right? And I want to caution people against that. I think the best interpretation you can have of 1984 is the same interpretation sci-fi author David Brin has. And he says sci-fi is not something that's when authors do these kind of sci-fi stories, they don't go, here's what I think will happen.
Right.
What they're really saying is, don't let this happen.
Right.
And what Orwell, and he admits that he's doing kind of a parody. He's really making fun of totalitarianism. If you dig down into the book, there's some goofy moments in it, and you're like, what? And you could see he's making fun of them. But nevertheless, he's saying in this book, so if Animal Farm is here's how the revolution takes hold and destroys its society, 84 is like, here's how they maintain that control. And he shows us is it becomes too late at a certain point, that the revolution, you can't break away from them. And a good modern example of this is North Korea. Hitchens likes to say that Kim Il-sung, I think the guy who founded North Korea, got a copy of 1984 and said, hey, do you think we could make this happen? Right. And that's really, and it's one of those things. So I always caution people, like, I don't think the world or the U.S. is living in the world of 1984. However, when we see the increments in that direction, particularly, the modern surveillance that we've been living under, and I think that's part of the reason why Orwell has gotten this kind of secondary rebirth. To
the point where there are cities that are installing fake cameras because they want their citizens to think they're being watched.
Yeah. And it's what's amazing about that is if you read the book carefully, Orwell isn't, writing a direct screed against surveillance. He sees it as an obvious bad, and he mentions it many times, but he doesn't spend a lot of capital on it in the book. He doesn't spend a lot of real estate on the book on it. He spends most of his time talking about war and rewriting history and abusing language and the oppression of love and things like that. But as happens with so many books, because, in our modern sensibilities and what's happened in our world, we pick this book up and reread it and go, oh crap, all that surveillance stuff is happening.
Right.
And it's one of those things where Orwell got really lucky in that case, that he writes this profound, powerful book against 20th century totalitarianism, and then it becomes this kind of warning of 21st century totalitarianism.
Right. I was just thinking that myself. For somebody who might have gone to the store in 1949 and picked this book up off the shelf, it had a completely different set of meanings than it does to somebody who would pick it up and read it now for the first time.
Well, I think a lot of people, back then even had a sense of we're being watched.
Mm-hmm.
It may on some level. They may have felt that we're like somebody's watching us to control us.
Right.
I think it may not have been the outspoken norm, but I guess with as time goes by, more conspiracy theories goes, it seems to be the regular now. But I'm sure they had quite a few people back then that agreed with that. Like, okay, we're being watched.
Right, but it was a different method, right? It was the secret police all watching you.
Yeah.
Right. I believe there's like some sort of like fact that floats around about East Germany that like 1/3 of the population were informants in East Germany during the Soviet occupation. That was that being watched moment, just being sold out. And you see that in 1984, the one character Parsons talks about his child sells him out, and he's so warped by the world he lives in. He is proud of his daughter selling him out. He's like, oh, that girl, she heard me talking in my sleep saying, down with Big Brother. I'm so glad she told the thought police before I fell too far off the tree.
Incidentally,
that kind of perversion.
I'm regurgitating information. I'm not going to try to pretend to be some scholar on George Orwell. But I did learn.
Neither am I.
During my preparation, my little bit of preparation that I was able to take in for this particular conversation, I did learn that because of 1984 is where we even get the term Big Brother is watching.
Yes.
Just like he came, I didn't know he came up with Cold War.
Yeah, the term Cold War.
I did not know.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that was his.
See, that's amazing. Like you said at the top of the interview, how much he's affected language.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, he has another fantastic essay. It's you can find it in the same little pamphlet that Why I Write is in, called Politics in the English Language. And he writes it in, I think, 46. And it's how language is being abused and how we use these euphemisms to change the way people think about bad things. And you see that again in 1984. He draws on that to write in the book later. And that's one of the things I've taken from him in a modern sense, is not just the totalitarianism, but the way people abuse language to get things they want, be they politicians or personal friends. is be very aware of these euphemisms and double meanings and newspeak and doublespeak and things like that.
Right. So, what do you think George Orwell would say about the technological advancements that our society has made, being that he seemed to have such a fear of being watched? How do you think he would feel about our society being so quick to volunteer everything these days?
So it's funny. I like to equate because a lot of people ask me this when the topic of Orwell comes up, is what would he think about this today? And playing the what would Orwell think is like playing the who would win in a fight, Hulk or Superman.
Yeah.
We really don't know, but
Superman.
Yeah, I was about to say you're asking the wrong room because we have very definite opinions about who would win that fight. But I get your point.
Right, but that's one of those things where whoever you want, right? But
right.
with Orwell, everyone wants Orwell to be on their side, right? It's everyone from conservatives, liberals, socialists, maybe not communists anymore. They still
they probably abandoned all that.
They still don't like him, but everyone really tried, and I think that's the great lesson is that he is bipartisan in his critique of abuse of power. It didn't matter if you were conservative or liberal or socialist or capitalist. He even he writes a review of Road to Serfdom by Hayek, right? Not a socialist, the Mr. Free Market Capitalism, Mr. Hayek. And in that review, he says, this is the wrong book at the wrong time, but Hayek makes some serious points about tyranny we have to be aware of. So he was very willing to give credit where credit was due if it comported with the anti-totalitarianism stance he took. He recognized that. So today, I think with surveillance, one, he'd be absolutely mortified because he kind of took it as a given that this is bad. That's why I don't think he explains why it's so bad. But I think he'd be even more mortified by the abuse of language and press and history that we're seeing these days. That would be where he was like, come on, what he, these phrases like collateral damage or things like mission accomplished or kinetic military action, that would mortify him, I think, the most.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought, like, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Terrell move, and I thought he was going to come towards the mic to say something. And then we ended up with a couple seconds of dead air.
Yeah, gotta love it. Awkward silence.
A little bit. It happens. We're in a garage, and we're shivering cold. You are in the comforts of sunny, beautiful California.
Yeah, I watched one of your streams for the first time not too long ago, and I'm looking at going, why are they wearing their jackets? And I'm like, they're in a garage.
Yeah, dedicated.
It's in a clubhouse.
Dedicated.
It's a clubhouse.
Yeah.
What did you say, Dustin?
Studio clubhouse.
Yeah. Call it a garage.
But it is the clubhouse. We love it here. I mean, not for nothing. I love it here because I drive an hour every Thursday to sit in either extreme cold or extreme heat. There never seems to be an in between. But we really are. It's a little off topic, but we really are fortunate to be able to do this every week. We have a lot of fun with it, and it's really cool to be able to have conversations and about things like this that neither of us are too incredibly versed in. It makes it easy to ask questions, though, when you don't know anything about what you're talking about.
It's the Larry King of method of asking questions. Like, I don't know anything about your book, so I'm going to ask you the most basic questions possible. Like, what the hell is this book about?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, I guess what percentage would you say you are done with your Orwell research?
Well, it's still ongoing. I've gotten through a good chunk of his essays.
Okay.
Maybe, and about half of his books, more than half his books, and I've listened to a bunch of them on tape. So when I say go through, I mean like take notes on.
Okay.
Right. So I've got about 3 more I really have to go through in detail, and what I'm spending some more time on are his biographies. I'm reading right now, The Wintry Conscience of a Generation, which is Jeffrey Meyer's biography on him.
Okay.
Very, very good. And Myers gives a very good YouTube interview overview that's indispensable.
So,
Hitchens has a great book called Why Orwell Matters.
I saw a video where he was doing a talk on that.
Yeah, and that's very, very good, and he does a couple discussions on that. And I'm trying to think, I have another very short biography by a guy, last name is like Lucas or something, I can't remember. gone through that in parts. So yeah, I guess it's really one of these ongoing processes. But this is where I'm kind of at right now. And like I said, it's kind of one of these things where, it's twofold. One, he was very important in the context of his time, and we shouldn't forget that, and why. And two, he amazingly has maintained his importance today, through kind of just A, sheer luck, and B, just the power of being honest. Yeah. And I think those are some of the lessons we can take from him is things like, one, certainly avoid abusing language, be direct and honest, and two, put a little effort into it. There's this thing of what people say about Orwell is that he wasn't this magnificently brilliant man. He was really just above average intelligence, but he just put the effort into it.
Right.
And I think those are important lessons to take from him.
So what's the end game? Do you want to
I will be
write
very
a book
selfish,
of your own?
and I will. No, I don't want to go that far. But I'll be honest, it's somewhat selfish. Like I said, I saw that panel at Phoenix Comic-Con, and again, I give the guys credit. They did do a pretty good job of putting it on. I disagreed with their interpretation, so
Gotcha.
I shouldn't say they were just wrong. You
just want to do a
taken
rebuttal
some issues
panel?
with it, right?
You want to do a better panel.
But what I wanted was I want a Comic-Con panel, and I think
Bigger,
this would be
better.
fun. I want to do like what we're doing
More
here for
Orwellian.
people at Comic-Con, because I do
Right.
think he has a very profound impact on pop culture also that I think is subtle,
yeah, for
because
sure.
if you don't remember details of 1984, you won't pick up on it. Let me give you a good example. You remember Star Trek: The Next Generation, the TV show, if you're
Vaguely.
familiar?
Yes.
Vaguely, yeah.
So there's an episode of Next Generation where Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart, is captured by Cardassians and aliens, and he's being
I thought he
tortured.
said a Kardashian in front.
Same thing.
Like they were
almost as bad. Right?
Almost as
bad. And the part where the alien is saying, "How many lights do you see?" and Picard says, "There's 4 lights," and he gets tortured every time he says there are 4 lights, because the alien's trying to get him to say there are 5, right? To break his own consciousness, to not trust his eyes. If you read the end of the last third of 1984, Winston Smith, the main character, is tortured by a character named O'Brien, and O'Brien puts 4 fingers in front of him and says, "How many fingers do you see?"
Huh.
And he says, "I see 4." And O'Brien electrocutes him every time, right? And in Star Trek, there's a happy ending because Picard is defiant, and there are 4 lights. That kind of famous moment. In 1984, it's much darker. I mean, O'Brien breaks him. At that moment where Winston says, "I think I see 5," when he knows there aren't 5, but he sees it.
Right.
And there's that moment at the end of Star Trek, in the end of the episode, he goes, "I knew there were 4 lights, but at the very end, I saw 5 of them." So I believe that's connected to 1984.
I mean, it must be. It's too stark of a parallel.
Yeah. So that's why he also, I think Orwell's, the way he painted dystopian futures, the bleakness, the stark, the just absence of color. I mean, we see that in almost every movie. I mean,
Right.
To the Hunger Games, it's the capital is pretty much London from 1984. It just has that cold, dark feel. Another good example. Do you ever see the movie Equilibrium?
Yes, that's a great
Equilibrium
film too.
is essentially an action version of 1984.
Right.
I mean, watch Equilibrium.
Watch it again. They
It's
call
a-
them
you
instead
said
of
you
calling
haven't
them
seen it?
No, I
thought
haven't
crimes,
seen
they
it.
call
What's
them
it based on?
sense crimes. It's like
Yeah.
it's almost identical.
It's a great film. Again, in a dystopian future, Christian Bale. It takes place in basically the powers that be have decided that everything bad stems from emotion. What creates emotion? Art. So they basically make art illegal. Like painters, poets, writers, they all go underground.
I'm definitely going to check that out then. Yeah.
And there's a special task force in place headed up by Christian Bale, who basically takes out these people who are breaking the law. But he starts to all of a sudden feel.
Right.
And he's got and they created this really super cool like
What are
style of
these
martial arts
things
just for the
in
movie,
me?
where they got like these they fight with firearms, and like his gun's got little spikes that pop out of it, and he'll like it's a dope freaking movie.
The movie's so much fun, but you think there's Big Brother in 1984, and in Equilibrium it's Father.
Right.
There's sense crime in Equilibrium. In 1984 it's thought crime. Same thing in 1984. They don't ban art, but art is completely controlled by the state. Julia, the female character, works as a mechanic on the machines that pump out cheap porn, right? All sanctioned by the state, and at least in Equilibrium, they just ban it outright. So he's definitely had an effect on our pop culture. So that would at least put it in a Comic-Con setting that I think, if you see 1984, you like Star Trek, you like Hunger Games, I think it's incumbent upon us to know, the important literary history and real history that kind of brought that about.
I'm sorry, I still think Hunger Games is a bootleg version of Battle Royale.
It's also that. You're not wrong. You are not wrong.
Bootleg version of Battle Royale.
It's just a cheap version of Battle Royale.
I've never heard of Battle Royale.
Watch it.
It's a movie?
Yes.
It's a movie and a manga. The first Battle Royale is a classic. The second one you can skip. But the first one.
But what's funny? Somebody put on George's post one time that Battle Royale 2 was their favorite non-Christmas movie. And I was like, I forgot that did happen around Christmas.
Yeah.
But now, random time. If you could ask Orwell any 3 questions, what would they be?
Oh, what great question.
All right, so that's good. I would really so as someone who doesn't totally agree with all the things Orwell says, I definitely would want to challenge him. And if he saw the whole of the 20th century, would he change his minds on capitalism? I'm very curious about that because he was very open to changing his mind. He was very anti-capitalist, and I was just curious if he saw the whole 20th century, if he would change his mind or he would stay the same way. The second, he doesn't really talk a lot about America, and I would love to know in detail what he thought of America. He's a very European writer, and Hitchens says that there was discussions, people wanted to bring him to New York to treat his TB, that he did talk about wanting to take a trip down the Mississippi. And my goodness, I always think about that as what did we miss out on?
Yeah, what might those experiences create?
What would he have seen taking the Mississippi from all the way from the north all the way down to New Orleans? If you read Road to Wigan Pier, I would really suggest reading Road to Wigan Pier. And because Orwell's, real kind of solidarity with the oppressed, what he would have written about the American South in the 50s, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things where, darn, I wish we got that. Orwell on the Mississippi, Orwell in Selma, Orwell during the Civil Rights Movement. Good God, that I can only imagine. And I would just be curious what made the dude happy. He was kind of a dour figure.
Yeah.
What made the guy happy? Not a funny writer. Although Homage to Catalonia is one of those books that are accidentally funny. Mm-hmm. Just to kind of, there's this old saying that fairy tales start with once upon a time and war stories start with no shit, this actually happened.
Yeah.
And that's what Homage to Catalonia basically is. There's a great passage. He talks about this shell, an artillery shell, that gets fired back and forth between the fascist and Republican lines that never explodes. They just load it into a gun and fire it back at them. And it's just a funny part. I don't know why I found that funny. But yeah, those are the things I would be really curious to know what he thought about America and about how he might have changed his mind over the time. What he would have thought of movies. He loved pop culture. What he would have thought of American movies, I would have loved to have known.
I'd kind of like to see how he'd react to modern day society.
Oh yeah, he
if he was to wake up in 2016 and look around, he was like, "Dude, I was fucking kidding. I was,
you didn't have to take me serious.
I was kidding. What are y'all doing?"
It's like these books weren't manuals, right?
Yeah, it wasn't what could you imagine though? If it got taken to the extreme that Dianetics did with the Scientologists.
Sure.
If somebody were to take 1980, like you said, it was the leader of North Korea was like, "Hey, can we make this happen?"
Yeah, I mean, it's almost every writer who writes about North Korea is like, we got to make a 1984 reference because that's what it looks like.
Right.
You've got the Big Brother figure. You've got everything is controlled by the state. It is incredibly depressing, and it's this near religion where you don't love each other. You love Big Brother.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when the Orwell research is done, which with somebody so layered, I imagine it's going to be a good while before you feel comfortable saying you're done. Are there any plans to move on to another figure you'd like to research? And if so, who would that be?
Yeah, I'm surprised you asked that. You know who else I've been fascinated by? Before Orwell, there was another guy I was fascinated. It was really a toss-up between this guy and Orwell, and the panel at Phoenix kind of tipped me in the direction of Orwell. And you know, Orwell's this very serious character, really like heavy stuff. This guy's not so much heavy. Robert E. Howard, the guy who wrote Conan.
Oh, okay.
I read one of the collections, the Del Rey, or I think is the name of the publisher, did 3 volumes of Conan, and there's a bunch of Robert E. Howard stuff. But the 3 volumes of Conan were for the first time, the Conan stories were done in the order Howard wrote them. So you could see the progression as a writer. And I have to tell you, yeah, they're written in the 30s, so some of them it's a little un-PC, but good God, they are fun books to read.
It's Conan.
It's Conan. They are so much fun. And what I liked about Howard in particular was he was able to take Conan and blend genres seamlessly in very short stories. That you would go from an action-adventure story to a Lovecraftian horror story to a Tolkien-esque battle in the same story.
Were these the same stories that were eventually translated to the comic books? Or were the comic books a standalone thing? Or do you know yet?
So the Roy Thomas comic books from Marvel are kind of standalone.
Okay.
The DC comics do draw directly from the Howard works.
Gotcha.
So some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them are originals, and I have no problem with that. And some are directly adapted from Howard's original shorts. And they're very good. Dark Horse did a fantastic job.
Now, see, those
I think they're on like volume 19
Yeah,
right
I'm
now.
familiar with the Dark Horse ones. I didn't know Marvel and DC even did Conan.
Marvel did DC with Roy Thomas, who wrote a lot of like X-Men and stuff like that. And they're I have a few of those. Those are nice. The DC ones were from the last 15 years. They're great. They are. If you get a handle on any of those, check them out. Fantastic art, and they really don't shy away from the like just grimness of Howard. And I'd recommend them.
Was it on the Vertigo line or was it straight the DC line?
Straight DC.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm sorry, not DC. Dark Horse. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
If I said DC, I screwed up.
I know Dark Horse did it. I didn't. Okay. Oh.
Yeah, I apologize.
All right,
Dark
cool.
Horse. Yeah, I'm looking at them. Right, they're right in my bookshelf next to me, and I see the horse, and I'm saying DC like a doofus. But yeah, I really recommend the Dark Horse ones because they've got the ones that are directly adapted from Howard's
They always
work.
have. Yeah. Dark Horse has always been the stepchild of the comic book industry, but it absolutely,
yeah. And I love their stuff.
But they,
got such eclectic taste, but it's like they did a great Godzilla run in the 90s that I still have.
They were always geared more towards an adult audience.
Anytime they can do Archie versus Predator, that was crazy. I only got like the first issue of it, but I was like, how?
I thought that was a joke.
No, it was real.
That's funny.
They really did Archie versus Predator.
Dark Horse made Predator and Alien fight everyone.
Yeah, Terminator.
It was like they bought the rights to
Judge
Predator and Alien. They were like,
Dredd.
we're just gonna make them fight everybody.
Yeah, basically. That was it.
All right, so that brings us about to the end of the show. I'm gonna be honest with you. I had great trepidation coming into this interview because I knew very little about George Orwell.
Oh no, I feel like I put you on the spot there.
And I was expecting George to do all the work.
And I did.
Yeah,
I did. But it's all good. I would love to have you back on the show if you ever were to do as much research on Howard. I probably have a lot more to contribute to the conversation, but I really, really enjoyed this. I hate to make it sound like that, but I'm surprised I enjoyed it so much. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, that's often the kind of reply, because again, it's one of those things like, am I going to get a literary lecture? Why do I care? And then you realize, whoa, this dude's seriously important.
Yeah.
And like, he's been in my subconscious and I didn't even know it.
And then I guess that's kind of the epiphany I've had, is just how much of an impact that he's had, not just on the literary world, but on pop culture and the world at large in general.
Society, shoot.
Well, all right.
And I do want to plug something because I
Go
know
for
you
it.
like to plug stuff at the end of the show.
Yes, plug it.
Oh,
Plug
and
it.
also tell us one more time where we can find the podcast.
We can find the podcast on all the streaming and social media services: SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, even on YouTube. ThereforeIGeek.com is the blog. I used to write for that. I've kind of spent most of the time focusing on the podcast. Comes out pretty much every Tuesday. Okay. I don't think I was on the last episode, but I'm on it fairly regularly. The show Thursday Night Magic at the Comedy Palace in San Diego, California, on Claremont Mesa Boulevard, almost every Thursday at 8 o'clock. The show's different every time. If we get a big audience, we do a big stand-up show. If we get a small audience, we do close-up magic. We put out a table and we give you a show. And if you see the close-up show and you want to see the stage show, find us on Facebook at Thursday Night Magic at the Comedy Palace, and we will get you in no cover. The other thing I want to plug is this Sunday, January 22nd at 8 p.m., you were talking about Kazi's Comedy Club earlier. That's a fantastic place. I performed there many times. I know the ownership. They're great people. But my buddy comedian Travis Carl is doing a
Shout out to Travis Carl.
Shout out to Travis Carl doing a recording. So I want to plug his show. So if you are in the Hampton Roads area listening to this, get your butt out to a no-cover special recording event featuring comedians I've all worked with who are all hilarious: Holly Owens, Brendan Kennedy, Richard Hamm, and the fantastic and fabulous Travis Carl.
Travis, if you're listening, swing by the venue, man. We miss you. It's been a while.
I said I would mention him, so hopefully he is listening, because that's the rule. You have to mention Travis Carl if you want him to listen.
Wow.
Travis is an incredibly hilarious comedian, too. I'm really glad that he's doing this. All right. So, anything else before we let you go?
Well, that's make sure you get everything. I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and I'm sorry it scared you. I know I was the one who kind of was like, "Hey, this would be fun."
No. I absolutely like that. I wouldn't have thought to say, "Hey, Joseph, you want to be on the show?" because you're in California.
Yeah,
it wouldn't have crossed my mind that we, to just do it via telephone like we're doing, and it worked out great. So you may have paved the way here for some out of state guests. But again, thank you. I want to applaud your
pleasure.
Drive.
Yeah,
it's very you're not going to see me doing any independent research on shit unless I'm about to figure out how to make a new bong or some shit. I'll research that. I'll research how to make microwavable brownies. I'll research that. But I ain't turning in no papers.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't turning no papers.
It's hard enough to get me to write my poems.
Yeah, neither am I. I'm doing panels, baby. That's where
there you go. There you go. Well, all right. We have been listening to Joseph DePaul. Thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate your time and your research. And good luck to you out there. Continued good luck to you out there. And congrats on the shows.
If you get that Comic-Con panel together, let us know.
Oh yeah, we definitely will.
Well, you can have the world-renowned chocolate milk and waffles. I couldn't even say that with a straight face. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening at home. That wraps us up for this week. Next week, who do we have on the show, Terrell?
We have Big Torn will be returning, and he'll be bringing Archie along to talk about what they do. It's the record shop in Norfolk.
Okay, nice. Oh, Big Torn?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. I just talked to him earlier today because he's going to be performing at the Valentine's Day event coming up next month.
Talk about something they're doing at the record shop in Norfolk.
All
started out for the hip hop purpers and MCs.
That's pretty dope. That's good that he's doing that. Torrin's a busy guy. We'll be happy to have him on the show next week. All right, so tune in next week. Same chocolate milk time, same waffle channel.
Syrupy. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, we do what we do.
Because we includes you.
Yes.
Good night, Joseph. Good night, Internet.